Welcome to Arise with Christ. We share stories and truths related to the temple. Together with you, our hope is to fortify faith in Jesus Christ and experience joy in covenant keeping.
Hello, I'm your host, Carolee Bailey. I'm here with my co-host, Anjali Plojek. Anjali, will you introduce our guest to our listeners?
Yes, I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Guy Madsen. Guy is currently a member of our stake presidency in the Lindon, Utah stake. As a community, we're all so excited for the temple that is being built in our neighborhood. And today we get to hear about Guy's unique perspective of growing up here in Lindon. Guy graduated from Pleasant Grove High School in 1980 and then served as a full-time missionary in the Virginia Roanoke Mission from 1982 to 1983. He graduated from BYU in 1987 with a degree in finance and financial planning, and now works in the life insurance and retirement planning industry, owning and managing Jamestown Wealth Advisors. Guy is married to Wendy Booth, who is from Ogden, Utah, and they are the proud parents of 5 children. Recently, their adult son, McKay, passed away in an auto accident. Today, Guy will share with us some personal experiences associated with McKay's passing. Much of his church service has been working with the youth, including as a bishop and bishopric member, as well as in multiple leadership positions in the young men's organization. He enjoys golfing, traveling, and playing with his grandchildren.
Anjali, you get to work with President Madsen in your calling as stake primary president. I'm curious about what that experience has been like for you.
It has been so much fun to work with President Madsen in my calling. I didn't know him prior to this at all, and so it has been such a privilege to serve with him. And he has a hilarious story for pretty much everything. So he is a lot of fun to serve with. And he's also a wise leader and really cares about people. So let's get to our interview.
President Madsen, thank you so much for letting us be in your home today. And
thank you for being here.
Yeah, this is going to be great.
We're so happy to talk to you.
Thank you.
And you are a native Lindonite.
I am.
Is that how you say it? I don't know for sure, but
I've lived here almost my whole life. Yeah.
So I have to say at the beginning, actually, before I ask you this question, that I sound a little bit off. I've had a cold, so if it sounds weird, I just wanted to give a little disclaimer about that. But
be forgiving with you.
No worries. Yeah.
So yes, back to being a Lindonite. Mm-hmm. What was it like growing up in Lindon?
I moved here in 1970, I think it was. And it was just a small little town, less than 1,500 people, one gas station, no lights. I guess there was 2 gas stations. One was on the border where Neaters is now, but there was a gas station there. They had just created the 3rd ward. We were part of the Pleasant Grove stake.
Okay.
Stake president, it was President Walker, who was where the temple site, that's his land. He was the stake president there. But it was just a small place. Everybody had land, everybody had horses, small farms. We had a small farm, a few cows and some horses, and raised a few sheep and rabbits, and we had chores every day. We played up here on the hills. We rode our horses up here. They didn't have a snowplow, so where it snowed today, Lindon did not have a snowplow. The roads just waited until they melted.
Wow.
There was no plows out there. So we just tried to make our own fun. We used to swim in the canal. We used to sleigh right up on the foothills up here. Some dangerous things that we would do. It was interesting as we look at where we're at right now and kind of where your house is at. That was so far away. I did my wilderness survival merit badge where your house is at.
I love thinking about that.
So that was way far away. There was nothing up here.
Wow.
And so it was just you could bring your horse up above the canal. This was all a big dry farm. And you could just ride it was great. It was a beautiful sight. You could be on the hill looking over the valley, and Geneva Steel was always kicking out the exhaust from all the things they were doing. And most people worked at Geneva Steel. My whole bishopric, most of my ward, I remember there were days that on a fairly frequent basis that all the members of my bishopric when I was a kid were working. And so they had to have somebody else conduct sacrament meetings because they were working.
Interesting.
And so a huge part of the community was Geneva Steel. But yeah, just one building right down off of Center Street, where it is now the community center. That was our building. And that it was a fun place to grow up. It really was. It was very easy to grow up here.
Yeah.
So, it sounds magical.
It was.
I have all boys. And so I just think how much they would have loved living in that environment.
It was fun. It would, like if you wanted to go when it was pheasant hunting season, all you had to do was just grab your gun because there were pheasants in our fields. You just walk outside in the backyard and shoot pheasants, and you could hunt deer right up here. Everybody had horses. It was a fun place to be. It really was. I miss it at times, but the one thing that I've known is that when we moved up here after we got married, this was our first area where the first house we bought was in this ward, not this home, but another one down the road. And just everybody that's moved here, everybody we've met has been so good. Lindon has gotten really, really good people here.
We have amazing people here in Lindon.
And we're very blessed. And some of the old timers that have been here forever, they are some of the best people that ever lived. And I really think that that's why we have this temple, is one, because we have really good kids today in these stakes in Lindon, but also we have some very hardy pioneer stock of people that are just the best of people. And I have such great memories of them.
Well, that reminds me, I just have to share this little bit from Elder Kevin W. Pearson when he did the groundbreaking for the temple. What you just said reminded me of this. He said, "We humbly acknowledge the legacy of faith that exists here in this area, from the early pioneer settlers to this very day. Bless them for their faithfulness and desires to keep thy commandments and to follow thy holy prophets." So it's definitely an amazing legacy that's here in Lindon.
Yeah, there's just great people here.
And you mentioned that it was the Walkers that owned the land that the temple is being built on.
Yes.
Do you have any particular memories associated with that?
I do. We played. He had two boys. We had several boys. We had two that were my age. And there was Clark that was 2 years older. Kent that was a year older. And then Carl that was a couple of years younger. And through his property was the way that we'd come and swim in the canal and those things. So we spent a lot of time where the temple is on that site. And we were always up there. It was just kind of the passageway through is coming where the temple's at. The little lane that is now Center Street, it used to not go all the way through. And so that was the way to the canal. We would swim in the canal right here, right here. So, but as far as I was talking to some of the family members, and there were 3 Walker families, I think, up here on the hill. They were all cousins, but I think 3 different families as far as brothers. And one of them was Don, and then Leon was President Walker. And he was an amazing guy. He had lost one of his fingers. He had a finger cut off. So when he'd on the pulpit, when he'd point at you, he'd point with that stubby finger, and it just looked like it was, he's ready to thump you with that. But he was one of those guys that you just wanted to be like. I remember going to his funeral. He's been gone for a long time, but we were told that by some of his family members that he said before he passed away, he told his family, "I think there's going to be a temple on my farm someday." And he's been gone for more than 30 years probably. So I thought that was interesting when they said there's going to be a temple in Lindon. I first thought, okay, it's going to be right there. He was a fun man. His wife's name was Ziona. He was the first. He was kind of the stake president. Then he was the regional representative. Then he was the first guy in the area to get called to be a mission president. He served in the Chile Concepcion mission. And then he just came back, and he was just this amazing guy. But then it didn't really last. He got sick young. He wasn't very old. Ziona just recently passed away. That's why they sold the farm, was after she passed away. So she's been gone less than 5 years. And I think she was probably a widow for 20, 25 years. So President Walker didn't last a real long time, but he made a huge impact on people.
Yeah.
So that I still remember being at state conference. I was a little kid, and I don't know why this is the big deal, but I remember being at a state conference, and he would always, during state conference, they had this great big huge nursery. They don't do that anymore, but they used to put kids in a nursery. Like, I guess we all got to listen.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, we had a huge nursery. It's like the whole young women's room, and they had people there watching. And he would always get up and go to the nursery during state conference, then come back. He'd always go visit them.
Oh, neat.
At least that's what I perceived anyway. And so we came in one time and he was talking, and he said, I was asking the kids about what they were grateful for. And he said, one kid said, "I'm just so grateful for the sunshine." And then our kid looked at me and he didn't know what to say. So it just kind of popped. I said, I am just so grateful for moonshine. So that's it. So I don't know why I remember that, but that's President Walker. And he just laughed about that. He had a great sense of humor.
Oh,
and
that's so great.
when I got my Eagle Award when I was a little kid, I went over to his office. And he wanted, I don't know why he wanted to interview me, but he wanted, I guess he interviewed probably everybody that got their Eagle, but he said, are you going to go get one of your palms? And I looked down and said, no, I'm not. I'm done. I did this and I'm done. I mean, I liked everything that we did, but I'm done doing merit badges. And he looked at me and said, yeah, I can see that. So I said, okay, thank you. So he didn't push me to do any more. So that was good.
That's great.
Yeah, good man.
Well, one of the things we think about you, President Madsen, is you are a champion of people and you cheer people on and encourage them. And Angeli, do you want to share what you thought about that? I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, just when we were talking about, okay, what do we want to ask President Madsen about? Just one of the first things that came to my mind is that you are a champion of people. When my son Isaac transferred from his full-time mission back home to a service mission, that was a really difficult time for him. And he needed a lot of bolstering and support. And I just felt like you were such a fabulous leader and example to him. And you reached out and for months would text him and reach out. And you didn't need to do that. You weren't his mission president. You were a member of our stake presidency. But just that encouragement meant a lot to our whole family. And so we were really grateful for that. But we see that over and over. And as I have conversations with other members of the stake, they say, do you get to work with President Madsen in your calling? And I get to say yes. And they say, wow, you're so lucky.
That's nice.
When I went in for my Temple Recommend interview, he prayed with me and he really, truly cared about what I was going through. And I hear that over and over. And it just is amazing. And really grateful for that example that you set for so many, because you have a lot of burdens on your back. We know that your life isn't easy, but yet you have this cheer about you and this scripture, Doctrine and Covenants 68, wherefore be of good cheer. I feel like you exemplify that.
I appreciate it. I always try to be in a good mood. I think I'm an optimist. I think I always have been. But the one thing that I learned growing up, and I think I learned it here in Lindon, I think I learned from people that were in my ward, is I was taught how to care for people. My mom was perfect at that. She was so good at everything that she did. And she had these friends in the ward that were they were amazing. And, there's one of them left. My mom and her other friend have all passed away, but there's one of them left. Everybody knows Veradine Walker, the, bright redhead little lady that walks around lives on Center Street. She was the librarian at Lindon Elementary for 40 years or something like that. And they were like the three amigos. Yeah, but I was taught by really good people. I remember being a little boy, being the teacher's quorum president. We had inactive kids in the ward. And I had to go to their house every week and give them the priesthood lesson because they weren't at priesthood meeting. Oh. And it was brutal. I had one kid that I didn't like him that much, and we got to become pretty good friends, and he moved and went to Texas. But I'd go into his house on Sunday afternoons and sit right next to him, and his dad was insistent we sit right on the couch, and his dad would sit there watching the football game, drinking beer and smoking cigarettes, blowing cigarette smoke on me while I tried to impart this lesson.
As a teacher.
Yeah, and I'm like, holy cow, what is this all about? But I learned about myself and this young man, we became pretty close. And then when he moved to Texas, we stayed pretty close for a lot of years. I was taught that. I was taught to go out as a home teacher. And I had a little widow who was in my ward. And my former bishop, when I was a deacon, he was released and he became my home teaching companion. And he would convince me. He literally had convinced me that if Sister Shumway goes out to her mailbox and slips in the snow and breaks her hip and dies, it's your fault because you didn't go shovel her walk. And so I would tell my dad got to go to work at 5 o'clock. I'd say, if it snowed, you have to wake me up because I got to go to Sister Shumway's house and shovel her walk because if she slips and falls, it's my fault. And I was convinced of that. And so I looked at that and I mowed her lawn 1,000 times. And every Sunday, Bishop Nelson would say, go see Sister Shumway and see if she needs anything. go see her and ask her. So I would search her out at sacrament meeting in the afternoon. Say, Sister Shumway, is there anything we can do for you? And she'd give me a list of things. I need my hedges, that you can do this. So I did all these things. And I was sitting there one Sunday, and she walks up to Bishop Nilsson, the adult in this home teaching committee, gives him this great big hug and says, I just appreciate all that you do for me. And I'm sitting there looking, wait a minute. I'm shoveling the walk. I'm mowing the lawn. I'm trimming the hedges. I'm carrying out your garden. He just tells me to do it all. Where's my hug, But I learned later in life, when she passed away, I cried. And because you love people who you serve. And I love to serve, and I love to serve in the church. And there's been so many good people who have done so much for me in their church service where they didn't have to. And I've seen miracles happen in my life where angels have told people to come and serve me in my lifetime. And so certainly I know that's the best way to do it. So I enjoy serving. I enjoy working with people.
Well, thank you for your example of service. And we've definitely learned from you in doing that. And I think you've kind of alluded to this, but at the core, right, of our desire to serve is an understanding of who we are and of our relationship to our brothers and sisters, that we are brothers and sisters, that we're all children of God, and that we have a covenant relationship with God.
Right.
And how have your temple covenants helped you to stay motivated to go, not just as the teenager to go shovel the walks, but through your church service to stay serving and motivated? How do you draw strength from those covenants?
Well, I think one is the thing that the temple does a lot for me is I think about my ancestors a lot when I'm in the temple. I think about all the hardships that they went through, and the things that they told me. My grandparents, I was very blessed. I got to know 3 of my 4 great grandmothers very well. They lived until I was an adult. They were alive till I was an adult. And so those are all people that they were parents that their parents walked across the plains. So they knew pioneers. They knew people that had gone through. They knew people that were in the Martin and Willie Handcart Company. They knew these things. And so they would talk to me about the fact that, these covenants that you're making in the temple, these covenants that you make at the waters of baptism, they're eternal and they're important. And so I always, whenever I go to the temple, I still think about several of my ancestors and stories that I've read and things that I've heard about them. And I have this need to not want to disappoint them. I don't know why that drives me, but I just don't want to disappoint them. I don't know how close they are and how close there is between here and the spirit world, but I feel like they're watching out for me and looking out for me. And I don't want to do anything that would make them be, I'd hate to have them say, hey, come and look at my grandson. Look how good he's. Oh, yeah, that's never mind. Let's go again. Maybe there's more pressure than I need to put on. But so the covenants that I've made is because I wanted to do that. And I look at, the sealing power that I have with my wife and with my family and my children. And that's gone on for generations now. I have ancestors that helped finish the Nauvoo temple so that they could be sealed before they came across the plains. And I can read their journals and I can realize what they said about why that meant it was an important thing for them to do. And to me, that if it was so important for them to go do that, to build something, to spend just a few moments in the temple and then leave, but the covenants that they made were so critical, certainly I should look at my covenants and take them very, very serious. And it's just, they're beautiful things.
Related to that, what habits have you fostered in your life related to temple worship?
I think the best thing that happened to me when I got back from my mission, when I left my mission president, in my exit interview, he said, he and I were very, very close. We traveled, we were with each other about 7 months, and we traveled almost 45,000 miles in a car. It was a big mission. He was he was in his early 40s. His wife they had little small children, and she got pregnant while she was out there. She had a baby while she was in the mission field. And so he and I and the other assistant traveled a lot with him. And we had these great conversations, but he said, okay, you're going home. You're going to live in Lindon. You're going to go to BYU. He says, is there any reason why you can't go to the Provo Temple once a week, every week for the next 2 years of your life? I said, no. He said, now don't tell me something that you won't do. And I said, I'll do that. So whenever we would talk, we talked by phone every couple of months. He would ask, are you going to the temple? And I did. I went every Wednesday at 1:00 for 2 years. I read the entire Book of Mormon inside the celestial room of the Provo Temple. I took the time to do that. And so what I realized is that when we're young and we start going to the temple and we start trying to figure all these things out, and the same thing as missionary work or anything in our service in the church, is that sometimes it's very much like the law of obedience that we talk about in the temple. Is that, when Adam and Eve were taken out of the Garden of Eden, it says they built an altar and they offered sacrifice to the Lord. And where an angel appeared to them saying, "Wherefore, why do you offer sacrifice to the Lord?" And Adam said, "I know not, save the Lord commanded me." Well, so many times I think that's what early temple attendance is. What are you getting out of the temple? I don't know. I just know I'm supposed to be here.
That's so true.
And so then you start to figure out, as you start looking, and you start to realize when they open the veil and they talk to you about the marks on the veil and the marks on your individual garment, and they talk about in the initiatory why you have those garments, and you start to realize that, I am putting on Christ in my life. The temple allows me to say, I want to represent Christ and be just like Christ, or as much like him as I can. And I think that's an important thing. But you start out with this obedience, just blind obedience, and then knowledge starts to come. And then you start to realize through the law of sacrifice, it's good for me to sacrifice. It's good for me to do things that take of my time to serve in the kingdom, to serve my fellow men, to have a church calling, to have a ministering opportunity. It's important to sacrifice my time because I'm more blessed because of the time that I spend doing that. So obedience turns to sacrifice, and sacrifice, then you look at it and it becomes, now it's the law of the gospel, where you look at this whole thing and say, this is who I am. This is what I've become. This is what I want to do every day for the rest of my life, is I want to wake up. I want to do good things in the morning. I want to serve people. I want to ask Heavenly Father, who should I go serve? And I want to go help people. Because I know other people are doing the same thing for me. And so those three things, I think, getting into that helped me more. That was probably the best decision I made in my life, was going there every week. But for me, it helped me realize where so many of my friends were struggling after their missions. I just kept moving forward. And it was a great thing. And I attribute that to the temple, wanting to do good things. So obedience became sacrifice. Sacrifice became, this is who I am. And then you're more prepared to make that wonderful commitment to your spouse over in the temple, where you dedicate yourself, and it's not just the law of chastity. It's you dedicate yourself and consecrate yourself to your spouse and to the values that what marriage are, and you also consecrate yourself to the Lord. And it's just such a beautiful thing. And we learn that step by step, and we don't learn that just by going a couple of times. It takes many times. So for me, that's where I think the covenants, they become more real as you understand them more. And the only way to really understand them is to go there and experience them and see what the Lord tells you while you're in there. You can't learn as much. You can read about as many books as you can, but you don't feel the things that you feel unless you're in the temple experiencing those things, and why those covenants are important.
Yeah, and what a great foundation you established for your family.
Yeah.
That you were building your own spiritual foundation, and you were ready, like you said, when you and Wendy established your family in the temple.
I agree. It was pretty easy to say, that's where we're going to get married.
So related to that, we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording, but your son McKay passed away from an accident almost 2 years ago.
Right.
And how would you say that your temple covenants strengthened you or helped you through that difficulty and mourning process?
Yeah, I think when we found out that he had passed away that afternoon, and we came home, and you have a whole bunch of visitors coming, and we just, a lot of people, when those things happen, they kind of close up. And it's okay. However people deal with grief, and a lot of people will say, here's a basket on the porch, and if you want to put a card or a thought on there. We didn't do that. We opened our door, and we kept our lights on. we had friends of McKay show up at 3:00 in the morning because the lights were on, knocked on our door, and we sat there and talked with them, and they brought these amazing stories about, we didn't even know about him and what he had done for them. And we learned of acts of service that he had done with his friends. And, I remember we had one kid come in and tell us that he knocked on our door about midnight one night. It's about probably a week after McKay had died. And he said, I got to Pleasant Grove High School, and I was a junior. And he said, I'd moved here from, I think it was Alaska. I had never met this kid in my life. I didn't even know who he was. And my wife didn't know who he was. And he said, McKay was my best friend in high school. And I'm like, well, I need to know more about you. And he said, I showed up there, this chubby little kid, and here's McKay, was this all-state athlete in 2 sports, and kind of the ringleader of all of his buddies. And he said, I met him on my very first class, my very first day at Pleasant Grove High School. And McKay was not one. He was very much about talking to other people. He was never one to say, I want to get the best grade. I think his goal in every class was, I want to have the most fun in this class than anybody else. But he talked to this kid the first day. He said, what's your name? Where are you from? And he said, I just moved here. And he says, well, that's cool. He says, listen, come down here and meet me right here, and I'll take you to lunch. So he said, at lunch, he said, McKay took me down there and said, this is, this young man's name. And he said, he just moved here from Alaska. He's my friend. And so now he has 15 friends. And he said, so from the very first day I got there, I was so scared. He said, I had friends from day one. And I looked at this kid and said, I don't even know who you are. have you ever been in my home? But I found it interesting that he would say that, McKay is my best friend. And so we looked at that and we thought about that, and we had these amazing experiences. And people would come in and say, well, this isn't right. Why did God allow this to happen? And we were able to talk about covenants and why that's important, and that to help them understand that we chose and actually fought a war in heaven, that we would have the right to come down to an imperfect world in imperfect bodies with imperfect people and try to find our way back to heaven. And the covenants that we would be able to find and make here would guide us through that. And so we had some amazing experiences reflecting upon the covenants that have been both made for us and also the covenants that we have made. And it helped see us through. I think one thing that happened, we were trying to find McKay's phone, and we couldn't find his phone. I didn't care about the phone. I wanted the pictures off the phone. And we just couldn't find it. They found it about 10 days after the crash, about 75 yards away from the crash site. It actually flew 75 yards. A county sheriff found it on a pile of, he had to go do a crash site analysis as to how far debris flew. And but we're trying to find it. But we'd call the phone and it would ring. So we knew it still had battery power, but we couldn't find it. And the car was really mangled. And so I would call Apple and call everybody else I could to say, can you just tell me where the phone's at? Is the phone in the car at the junkyard, or is the phone at the crash site? And I'll go keep looking for it. But I got a hold of a girl at AT&T, and I told her what had happened. And she said, oh, that's so sad. She said, you're never going to see him again. And I said, no, I believe I'm going to see him again. I'm Christian. I believe this. And she said, no, I'm Buddhist. And she said, you're not going to see him again. And we had this, very constructive back and forth, and she was very much, dug her heels in, saying, "No, you're not. I'm so sorry, but you're not." And I hung up the phone, and I thought, okay, do I believe this, or am I just saying this, or do I really? So I took several days and at the temple and everything else, and do I believe this? Do I really, really believe this? And I do. I wish I knew her phone number. I could get a hold of her. She probably helped me as much as anybody. They realized that, no, I've made covenants with God, and my son will be with me forever. And I know he's happy, and I know that everything's going to be okay. And even though I'm missing like crazy, I know he's doing good things. And I know that he also made covenants, and some of the questions that he had in his life before he passed away, he struggled a little bit with some church history things. And I know those questions were answered for him. So I know, because of the covenants that he has made and the missionary that he was and the person that he was and what was in his heart, he's a lot farther down the path than I am right now. And so there's a lot that I can learn from him when I eventually get to see him again. But all because of covenants that we've made.
Wow, thank you. I was just thinking maybe those ancestors that helped with the Nauvoo Temple helped answer those church history questions for him.
Yeah, my mom passed away, just a few years ago, and she was very close to McKay. And I know that I'm almost certain. I just felt this one day, sitting in the temple, and also just here at night, that when he went through the veil, probably one of the first things my mom did was, okay, let's go. She grabbed him by the hand and let's go meet Joseph Smith. And you can ask him any question you want. And my mom would have pushed her way into that situation. I'm sure Joseph is busy up there too. But I'm sure within minutes or moments, all the questions that he had were taken away and are gone. He didn't have any questions anymore. And he knows Joseph Smith is a prophet of God. Because he had that disconnect where he believed in the Book of Mormon with all of his heart, but he just struggled with some other things. So once those got answered for him, I'm sure he's just doing great things where he's at. That helps me.
Well, and that's a common thing right now, right? We're seeing a lot of that among younger people, that disconnect. But tying back to the covenants, that can be a source of strength, and to get through those times when there are questions or doubts or concerns, that if we follow your example of consistently going to the temple, then we gain more knowledge and understanding too.
Well, I think, President Nelson in his last conference, I think the one thing that he said that I just get a lot out of, the reward for keeping covenants with God is heavenly power that strengthens us to withstand our trials, temptations, and heartaches better. This power eases our way. Those who live the higher laws of Jesus Christ have access to his higher power. Thus, covenant keepers are entitled to a special kind of rest that comes to them through their covenantal relationship with God. I love that. It gives us rest. It gives us peace. Keeping our covenants helps us withstand all the things that are taking so many kids out of the church right now. That they have it backwards.
Yeah.
That they for some reason they're saying I shouldn't be keeping my covenants, but if they would just keep their covenants, they'd find the strength to stay involved and stay in.
And their way would be eased.
Yeah, much more. And they're blessed that it would be easier.
Yeah.
So.
And finding that rest, right? Which is really what they're seeking, is peace and rest. And that comes as we endure faithfully and keep our covenants.
Yeah, I think I've talked to a lot of kids. I was bishop, and a lot of them are struggling. They're struggling with their faith right now and trying to figure out, where do I go? And they're more out than they are in. And so I just think the other thing that keeping your covenants, going to the temple, you're the ability to remember spiritual moments in your life. Because that's one thing these guys tell me is that, I just don't remember feeling the Spirit. And I'm like, I find that interesting because I can remember feeling the Spirit with you on a lot of occasions. Well, I remember being at Zion's camp, or being at a youth conference or on Trek. I remember these things that you've got up and bore your testimony, and they don't remember that. I think if they would go to the temple more, probably they'd remember those things more. And so,
well, I think that promise of renewing our covenants in the sacrament and the promise of having the Spirit always to be with us, that's one of the roles of the Holy Ghost, to bring all things to our remembrance. And we can remember that we did know and that we did feel the confirmation of truth.
Yeah,
and when we distance ourselves from that, we miss out on that.
Yeah. You don't want to forget. We have too many people who they don't remember the times when they felt the Spirit. Yeah. So it's important. You're right.
Thank you. Well, we are so grateful for your time today and all that you've shared.
I appreciate it.
It's just been fabulous.
My pleasure. Grateful for the two of you.
So we have one final question that we like to ask here on our podcast. And that is, President Madsen, how would you encourage someone to arise with Christ?
I love that. I love that theme. So I looked that up. And one of the things that the dictionary says is, what does it mean to arise? And it says to arise means to emerge or to become apparent or to come into being. And I love that, because that's what we all want, is we all want to become apparent in the eyes of our Heavenly Father and our Savior, Jesus Christ. That when they look at us, they know that our hearts are turned to them and that we want to serve them. We also want to be like them. And we want to do all that we can in our power to make sure that we do those things that will help us get closer to them. the best thing we can do. I think in my life and in our stake, one thing we're looking at is we look at all these different parameters that they want us to look at. We want how many people are going, what percentage of people are going to sacrament meeting every week, how many people are doing their ministry, and how many people have current temple recommends. What about our young people? How many of those kids are attending? And we look at all those, and those are important. Those are never going to go away. However, the one thing that I wish we could do is just say, what if every member of our stake was going to the temple every week? Every adult member. And maybe once a week is too much for some people, but what if they were going twice a month or even once a month? Sometimes with people, when they're not going at all, going once a month would be a huge thing. How would our life be better? And I think all those other parameters, our sacrament attendance, our ministry, everything would rise, and we'd become more apparent. So we're trying to arise as a stake. How do we become more apparent that as a stake, we're serving Christ and we're trying to follow him? The temple is key to all of that. We look at what President Nelson says, is that our covenants and the temple is what will keep us relevant in this life, relevant to the people that need us to be there for them. And so I love your theme, but I love when I had never thought about that thing it was saying, to become a parent. I want to be a parent. I want it to be very apparent to my Heavenly Father that I want to follow him and that he can trust me. And that if he shares something with me or asks me to go serve somebody, that I'm not going to wait till tomorrow. I'm going to go do that right now. Because I know if he can trust me, he'll give me more good things to do. And those are always good experiences. So I love the theme of your podcast.
Thank you. Well, we do too. We love thinking about arising with Christ. And I think as you were talking, one of the thoughts I had was that we are trying to be made over in his image and receive his image in our countenance. Mm-hmm. And that's how it will become apparent. Yeah. If we have his image in our countenances, it will be apparent to other people that we are disciples of Jesus Christ. So thank you for that. I love that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
We are grateful that you joined us today. We would love to hear your stories about how you arise with Jesus Christ. You can find us on Instagram at arise.with.christ or email us at arisewithchrist.temples@gmail.com.